Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, welcome to the end of month Q&A video for June 2022. And before we get going today, I need to say I am absolutely exhausted. I was at the Glastonbury Music Festival this last weekend, and I'm kind of used to living almost on like a different time zone. I feel jet lagged. I'm used to getting up late and going to bed at 3, 4 in the morning. So I'm pretty shell shocked and I'm struggling to string sentences together. But had a great time at Glastonbury. If you've never been and you have the opportunity to go, absolutely go. However big you're imagining the Glastonbury Festival is, it's at least 5 times bigger than that. I think it's 250,000 people there nearly, hundreds of stages. It is just absolutely crazy. It's a different league to any other festival I've ever been to. But saw some amazing bands there over the weekend. Who was good? I got wind of Jack White's Secret Set, so I kind of got down the front for that. He was very good. Paul McCartney brought on Dave Grohl and Bruce Springsteen, which was a bit of a surprise. I'm not a massive Beatles fan, but I couldn't deny McCartney put on one hell of a show. Metronomy were really good. I'm a big fan of Anna Pryor, their drummer. She's fantastic. St. Vincent was amazing as well. Lots of brilliant things I saw over the weekend. But for me, Glastonbury's all about having a load of cider and falling into the really tiny tents, because there's always something good in there. I saw this amazing band on Thursday night. I think they were called the Odd Beats or the Off Beats or something. They're a folk band from, I think, Turkey. Absolutely wonderful. So it's great for just discovering new music and finding out about bands that you never knew existed and wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. So I absolutely recommend going to Glastonbury if you ever get the chance. But that's a very long, rambling way of saying I'm struggling to function today. I need to go back to bed, and I'm going to do my best to get through this video without it being complete garbage. So fingers crossed we can get cracking now and it will go well. So who's up first this month? Sam Mason. Amazing selection and superb playing. Thanks, Sam. I bought a Kingsley Page based on your content, and now I'm planning on asking it to marry me. Really interested in the Kaluna, looking for a pedal that can nail a Dan Hawkins rhythm tone running into a clean pedal platform amp. From your collection, what would your choice be for that? Probably would be the Kaluna, to be honest. It's definitely got a Marshall voice to it, or you can dial it in to have a Marshall voice at least. And to me, the Kaluna is in a similar kind of bracket to something like the Tubesteader Sunkeeper, in that it really excels at higher gain levels. The Kingsley Page that you've got, it only really goes up to medium gain by most people's standards. I like it sort of with the gain about 3/4 of the way up, for that kind of low gain crunch, whereas the Kaluna loves to be gained up. It's got a super thick low end on it, very saturated, but sounds absolutely amazing. So that's probably what I would use for a kind of higher gain Marshall sound. If you're wanting to be in the solid state world, probably the old 90s big box Marshall Governor. It's an amazing pedal, and every time I plug into it, it just floors me at how good it still sounds, and I need to play it more. So yeah, I'd probably go with the Kaluna for a sort of Dan Hawkins type heavy gain Marshall sound. Kevin. Hi Joe, just having another look at this pedal. I was impressed with the tones you got out of it, but I suspect that this pedal only starts to work when pushing an amp that's already getting crunchy. I don't run my amps that way, so would this be a waste of money? Or could I get good results using it to push a low gain drive pedal? Now this was the Crazy Tube Circuits Superconductor that I demoed last month, I think it was. It's a very cool boost pedal with 4 classic boost circuits in it. And yes, when demoing boost pedals especially, it's very dependent on what amp you're running them into and how you have the amp set, because it's a very practical consideration when you're someone who makes videos. Because if you run a boost pedal into a clean amp with infinite headroom, all you'll really prove is that as you turn it up, aside from the basic EQ shape and coloration, it gets really loud. And if you sit down to mix the audio on a video like that, you start the video off and go, here's my clean tone, and you can't hear the guitar, and by the end it's blowing your speakers up. So running it into an amp that's just below the edge of breakup, which is how I like to demo boost pedals, it allows you to hear the sort of basic shape of the pedal with a clean platform. You can hear it push the amp a bit louder, but then it starts to drive the amp, and it's how the boost interfaces with the cooking tubes in the amp that's really where the magic is in boost pedals, I think. So it kind of lets you hear everything, but whilst keeping the dynamic range of the recorded audio in a sensible kind of range of dB rather than just having it astronomically huge so you can't hear the beginning and by the end it's deafening you. You can keep it a bit more kind of consistent throughout. So yes, it's very dependent on the amp you're putting it into. The Crazy Tube Circuits pedal has those 4 different flavours of boost, like the ZVEX Super Hard-On circuit is really bright and glassy. The EP Booster with the fat switch in is a bit thicker. So lots of different flavours, but you can absolutely use it to push drive pedals too. Up to a point, you know, they tend to work better into amps, but you can use it to gain up a pedal or give a pedal a level boost or whatever. Definitely work with drive pedals. So I wouldn't say it's a waste of money, and that pedal gives you 4 classic circuits, so you can just choose the one you like the most. Yusuf Kasim. Love the Q&As. They're very entertaining and I learn a lot from them. Well, with how tired I am, we'll see if anyone learns a lot today. I very much doubt it. Do you know about the company Matamp? They have history with orange amplifiers and they were there since the beginning. They do still make amps and they have a model called the Matamp Series 3000, which is supposed to be pretty similar to the orange Matamp amps that were used by Peter Green, Paul Kossoff and Jimmy Page in the late 60s and early 70s. They have a pretty interesting history. You should check them out. I am aware of Matamp. I've never played one of their amps, and you're absolutely right that when orange amps first started, I believe what happened was Cliff Cooper took one of the Matamps, dissected it, wasn't totally happy with how it sounded, so made some adjustments and kind of created the first orange circuit, but then they didn't really have the capacity to build it. So they approached Matamp and said, look, we've kind of tweaked your circuit and we like it, would you build some amps for us? And Matt Mathias, who ran Matamp at the time, said, yeah, okay, I'll do that, but I want to have my name on it. So that's where the orange Matamp came from, because it was orange and Matamp working in collaboration. Why that arrangement stopped, I can't remember. I can't remember if there was a falling out or the capacity grew beyond what Matamp can do or whatever, but I'm aware of Matamp and I'd love to check out some of their amps. I think, from memory, they're based in Huddersfield in the north of England. I'm actually driving to Huddersfield this coming Monday, and I'm there Monday, Tuesday. So if anyone from Matamp happens to be watching this, or you know someone at Matamp, let me know, and I would love to demo one of your amps and then post it back to you. So very long shot, but let me know if you hear this before Monday or Tuesday next week. Corey Fraser. For some reason, I thought the broadcast just had a charge pump. Am I wrong? So this is my broadcast here, which is kind of the standard issue broadcast. And the video that Corey's commenting on was when I was trying this running on different voltages. So these standard issue broadcasts are 9-volt pedals. They take a 9-volt power input, but they can handle voltages up to 24 volts, which is where that video came from. They do make some of these with a dual foot switch, but they also make some that do have a charge pump to take a standard 9-volt input up to 24 volts internally. So as I said in that video, absolutely 100% check that your broadcast is capable of handling those higher voltage inputs before you start playing around with it. I don't want to be responsible for anyone blowing up their broadcast. But these standard issue pedals do not have a charge pump. They're a 9-volt pedal, but you can run them on higher voltages for different tonal effects and more headroom and all that sort of stuff. So that's where that video came from. But again, please check before you start playing around with voltages. Things do go bang if you give a pedal a voltage it's not designed to handle. Marky the Sharky. Hi Joe, been looking all over for help with this. The problem is, the LED in my Boss Chorus CE3 is on, but its illumination is so low, it's hard to read if it's on. What's causing this and how do I make it brighter? So I had a little bit of a backwards and forwards with Marky the Sharky here, and my first guess did turn out to be right. And it's something that I struggled with for years with old Boss pedals, and that is that a lot of old Boss pedals, like the old CE2 and things like that, they were designed to run on a power jack input called an ACA adapter, which was a 12-volt input. And it's really weird because if you give an old Boss pedal a 9-volt battery, it runs on 9 volts. If you give it a 9-volt input, it scales the power down to about 6 volts internally, which gives you less headroom. It can make the pedal misbehave a little bit if it's a modulation that requires a bias, but it can also make the LED really dim because they're designed to have a 12-volt input that it then scales down to 9 volts. So why they ever thought that was a good idea, I've got no clue. But that turned out to be the problem, and that's something I've found before. So if you give an old Boss pedal that's designed to take a 12-volt ACA input, a 9-volt input, it scales the voltage down in the same way, and it runs kind of on starved voltage internally. and it can cause the LED to be really dim. So again, with the last comment about the broadcast, absolutely check before you start playing around with giving your pedal different voltages. Make sure that if you have an old Boss pedal, it's absolutely designed to run on a 12 volt ACA input if you're going to give it 12 volts. Things such as the old DC2 Dimension C is designed to run on a PSA input, which is a standard 9 volt. So absolutely check. There's usually a sticker next to the power jack or on the back label saying what power it requires. But if you have an old Boss pedal and the LED is really dim or it's a bit crunchy, it could be that it needs ACA power. But again, 100% double check before you start giving it different voltages. Marius Luca. Kudos, great job, dude. Verley rules. It's as close to the original as it will ever get. I own both of them, so I think I know what I'm talking about. I have 2 rigs, so I'm ordering a second one. I was using the Jet Phaser forever because, as you said, it's a unique, fantastic phaser. And now it doesn't take half of my pedal board space. And as you well said, Verley has drastically improved some of the original deficiencies. Highly recommended. So this was the PastFX Jet Phaser that I demoed at the beginning of this month. Very fun pedal. And as Marius said, it's not the best phaser circuit you will ever hear. It's not the best fuzz circuit you will ever hear. But put them together with the added tweaks that PastFX include in this, it just makes you smile. It's not a sound that I would typically use, but if you're ever struggling for inspiration or creativity, sometimes just plugging into a completely wacky pedal can really revitalize your songwriting and bring things out of you that you wouldn't otherwise play. And this is one of those pedals, so it's a very, very fun thing. Definitely check it out if you like the sounds in that video. Enrico Palazzo. Always great to get questions from Enrico in these Q&As. It's cool too to have the classics, but sometimes, especially when you hit a dead spot, you need to get weird. I really enjoyed this pedal. When you engaged the fuzz with the phaser, it had a really synthetic sound. Exactly, you need to get weird sometimes. Joe, I have a couple of questions. Okay. Number 1, I know you love the classic stuff, but since it seems that you enjoyed this pedal so much, will you try more weird analog effects like ring modulators, synth pedals, etc.? I wouldn't be against trying some analog ring mods and things. I did sell a ring, but I had the way huge ringworm that just sat on the shelf for years and I didn't use it, so I sold that last month actually. I wouldn't be against it. I do tend to live in plug a guitar into an amp and crank it up so it sounds like classic rock world. But yeah, if anyone wanted to sort of send me a pedal to demo that's a bit more weird and out there, I'd absolutely do that, no problem at all. Number 2, do you practice and how often do you do it? What do you do to warm up your fingers? I don't have a practice regime in terms of like practicing scales and learning new chords and all that sort of stuff. I predominantly play guitar for fun and just for my own enjoyment, really. And for me, the tone chasing and trying to make things sound as good as they can sound, that's as important, if not more important to me than getting my technique better and learning more theory and that sort of stuff. I just like to make myself smile when I crank an amp up and it's belting me in the face and it sounds amazing. So I don't have a practice sort of regime or anything. I do try and learn new things, but it's mainly trying to get sort of new riff ideas that I can then use in my demo videos, because of course you can't use copyrighted riffs anymore because the record labels take all your money. So that's the sort of thing I like to do, just play and see what comes out, and if an interesting idea comes out, I will make a note of it on like the voice notes on my phone and then go back to it at a later date and try and develop it a bit. But no, I don't sort of sit down and practice scales or anything really. To warm up my fingers, I just play, just hit some chords. And sometimes, depending on the video you're making, you want to warm up more than other videos. Other times it's good to kind of be a little bit kind of rusty and plug in and learn on the fly and interesting things happen. Other times you end up doing quite a few takes and your fingers are very warm by the end of it. Number 3, tunings. Do you always play in standard E tuning, or do you also use other tunings like drop D, or even unconventional tunings like tuning all the strings to the same note like the guitarist of the Gary Glitter band used to do? I'm pretty much in standard all the time. Occasionally drop D, like drop the low E down to a D so you can play some chuggy, heavier power chords. I do occasionally, if I'm songwriting or recording, play around with things like Dad Gad or Open G, but it's pretty rare that I ever do that. I'm pretty much standard 99.9% of the time. And finally, number 4, do you use stuff like a capo, slide and ebow? Not very often, to be honest. Again, only if I'm recording. So I'm usually in kind of first position cowboy chords. But if you're recording, you want a slightly different voicing, you can use a capo for that. So it's only usually if I'm after a slightly different interpretation of a chord higher up the neck that I use a capo, not routinely. Same for a slide. It's nice sometimes for recording, but I'm not a slide player. I'm terrible at playing slide. And I don't actually own an EBow. I never have. Primarily because I've got the old Ibanez Gem copy that has the Fernandez sustainer in the neck, and I use that for all my kind of sustainer, EBow, wobbly stuff. So it's never really been necessary for me to buy an EBow. So I'm pretty traditional with most things. First position, standard tuning, and just crank out some classic rock. And that's kind of where I live, and I'm not someone who is forever trying to further their technique or anything like that. I just like to make myself smile with music. So thank you, Enrico, for all those questions. Jim Hagerman. Hi, Jim. And this is on Jim's pedal, the valve, the starved tube pedal. I'm a bit surprised the sound was so dark, but perhaps that is just the equipment used is different from what I have. Anyhow, I am reducing the output filter a bit to extend bandwidth beyond 10K, so frequency response of the signal should no longer be impacted, just added warmth and distortion if driven hard. Also, I've added a tube protector bar, same price. So this was when I demoed the Hagerman valve pedal, and it was a very sort of warm, sort of slightly rolled off up top boost pedal running at starved voltage. Now, I was chatting with Jim after I sent him the video and it all went live, and I have modded that pedal now. I took out the filtering capacitor, I think it is, and it's now much more full frequency. It doesn't have that top end roll off, but it sounds like Jim has kind of done himself in the production pedal as well. So I might make a second video at some point with the valve to show you the lack of filtering that it now has and how it's much more full frequency, but it's much more to my tastes having that clarity in there, absolutely. MK Win. Dumb question, there's no such thing. Considering the particular tone you're trying to achieve, why don't you have the Hudson's gain maxed? So this was a video I made, I think it was last year, comparing the Hudson Broadcast, which is a kind of direct to console preamp type sound, like as in like the Beatles Revolution, that sort of fizzy sound, and I was comparing it to a real kind of studio Neve style preamp and driving that and seeing how close it got. Now the Broadcast isn't a clone of a Neve preamp like the Revolution sound was. It's actually, I think it's an RCA Broadcast console, but it's a similar concept, even though it's a different kind of topology. Now, the reason for not maxing the gain was I was trying to do that direct comparison with my preamp, and the preamp I've got here, which is very true to the original Neves, it doesn't have much gain when you crank it up, and I was using a boost to try and make it more gainy. If I'd maxed the Broadcast gain, all that would have actually shown is that the Broadcast is way more gainy than a preamp, and it wouldn't have really told us much about what we were looking into. So I was trying to compare the fundamental breakup characteristics and EQ and that sort of stuff, rather than which has the most gain. But yes, you can crank up the gain of the Broadcast and make it super fuzzy, way more so than you can a preamp, and that's a lot of fun to do. Paul Alexander, this or BK Butler. And this is, again, going back to the Volbrook Kaluna. The Kaluna for me, absolutely. And, you know, you see those threads going around on something like the gear page, which is like, what's the piece of gear that's held in the highest regard that you just don't bond with? For me, that's the BK Butler tube driver. I wasn't really a fan of that pedal. It worked for so many people. You know, Eric Johnson loves his. I wouldn't want to argue with Eric on anything to do with tone. But for me, I kind of bought that pedal, demoed it, and it sat on my shelf for years. And every time I plugged into it, just nope, and plug something else in and play guitar. So I sold it in the end. I just didn't really bond with it. And again, a slight segue here. The tube driver, yes, it has a tube in it, and yes, it's an overdrive, but it doesn't actually use the tube to create the actual overdrive. It's an op-amp clipping circuit like most other ODs, and then it just passes the audio through the tube on the output for a bit of subtle coloration. The tube isn't actually really doing much in the tube driver. So I much prefer kind of real tube overdrives where the tube is actually used to create the clipping. That gives me a lot more of the reasons why I buy tube overdrive pedals. It gives me more of that sag, more of that kind of tube amp sound, way more than the BK Butler did. It's really gainy, the BK Butler too. It's a perfectly fine pedal. As I said, a lot of people love it, but for me, I just didn't really gel with it. So I passed it on to somebody who will get a lot more use out of it than me. Johnny M. Fantastic video, Joe. Thank you. I've been finding myself transitioning to lower output humbuckers for all the differences you pointed out, less compressed and more clarity due to the extra high-end content, which I tailor further with pot values. My fave magnets right now are Alnico 4s and Alnico 5s. Great work, my friend. Cheers. So thank you for that. And yes, this was a video looking at the Tele on Steroids label that's often applied to really good PAFs. And yeah, the big difference between PAFs, or very good repros, and modern humbuckers is they are lower output, they're not wax potted, and they just have a more kind of chimey top end. They're not rolled off in the way that most modern humbuckers are. I think there's another question here about this video. Yeah, Matthew Smith. Great topic, enjoyed the video. I'm a Tele fan, and sadly for me, the PAF pickups sound a little muddy for my tastes. They do have more of that sort of humbucker lower mid going on compared to the Tele as we heard in that video. I always thought a Tele on steroids tone was the P90 pickup. And yeah, if I was trying to think of a Tele sound just beefed up a bit, I probably would gravitate towards a P90, but the label Tele on steroids is very often applied to PAFs too, and that's the concept I was wanting to look into in that video. But yeah, you can definitely get probably closer to the Tele on steroids thing using a P90 pickup, definitely. But a lot of really interesting comments on that video. Head over to it and have a look. There's a lot of really cool stuff that people were saying. David Little, isn't it the tube screamer which has the mid hump? The clon is clear, no? But I defer to your great knowledge, I guess. They're both mid-pushed pedals, but they're very different from each other. So I'll probably get some of the exact numbers wrong here, go and sort of do a lot more reading on this. But the Tube Screamer, I think, is mid-pushed around kind of 500 to 700 hertz, the sort of lower mid area, whereas the Klon is more focused around, I want to say 1.2K. Again, that could be wrong. It's slightly higher in the sort of the mid frequency. So they both push the mids, it's just low mids versus mid mids. But they're pretty differently voiced pedals as well. So the Klon has the charge pumps, it runs at 18 volts, so it has more clean headroom. It's sharper and quicker on the attack compared to the Tube Screamer. The Tube Screamer is always kind of gainy and a bit mushy, even at its lowest gain, whereas the Klon can run at its sort of famous clean boost setting with gain all the way down. They're very different pedals used for very different things, but they are both mid-push, just in slightly different places in the frequency spectrum. Kevin. Damn it, Joe, stop spending my money. Sorry. This is going to be a great alternative to my chorus, but then, update. I was really enthusing over this. The effect is great. I noted the guitar crunch in a couple of places where you were playing, but dismissed it as a bit of amp bite. I just got to the end of the video, and that overload issue within the pedal is a deal breaker. It's a real shame that Thorpy wasn't able to mitigate this in the design. So many thanks for the info. And there's another question here along a similar line from John Rosson. Excellent demo of a beautiful sounding flanger. Kudos to you for addressing the breakup problem. I broke up with my Camoflange within days of receiving it due to the toxic relationship it had put me through, offering such incredible scintillating modulation and then thrashing my heart whenever I wanted to dig into it with my guitar reverb and gain selection. Seriously, I just feel like Thorpy should have worked on this one for a bit longer and figured out a way to give it much more headroom. I've played several other BBD based flanges, told you I was tired, that do not break up in the same ugly way that the Camoflange does. It's a real shame because at its core, it's one of the best sounding flanges I've ever heard, but the breakup is just a total deal breaker for me as well. So between, oh hang on, I've got the wrong way on my questions there. Between Kevin and John, that is exactly my experience too. As I said in that video, it is so close to being my favourite flange I've ever played. It's wonderful in so many ways. It just falls at that final hurdle. And that headroom issue is a real problem. I was trying to do some recording with it, and I was sort of having to like gently stroke the guitar to stop it breaking up, and then you hit it a bit too hard and it crunches, ruins the take, you have to start again. It's so frustrating. And I mean, I know absolutely nothing about pedal design, so I'm not going to sort of speculate on why it crunches up and other pedals don't. But I don't know, it is a real problem with that pedal, and it really, I had to sell it on in the end because I just couldn't live with that distortion. And as John said there, I've played plenty of other BBD flanger pedals that don't have that headroom problem. And the Cool Audio reissue BBD that the Camoflange has in it is exactly the same BBD that the Retro Sonic flanger has in it. The Cool Audio, I think it's the V3207 from memory, I guess the MN3207 reproduction. The Retro Sonic flanger runs at 18 volts with that chip in it. Now, I don't know whether the voltage is dropped going into the chip, as I know nothing about how circuits actually work. But pedals that run on 18 volts typically have more headroom than pedals that run on 9, and the Thorpy is capped at 9. You can't use higher voltages with it. I can't help but think there might be something in that they could have done differently, or having like a compander circuit, which a lot of old tape machines had. So the signal comes in, the level is dropped, it's processed at a lower level so it doesn't distort the internals, and then on the output it's boosted back up. So it's a unity volume pedal, but internally it drops it and brings it up so it doesn't distort. That sort of stuff, or even like a compression circuit on the wet part of the signal. I demoed the Fairfield Circuitry Meet Maud delay last week, and that has that little compression switch, and it only affects the wet signal, and it just limits the transient so it doesn't overload the BBD. Maybe it could have used something like that. There must have been reasons, and I would never in a million years claim that I've kind of come up with some solutions that Thorpy and or Dan Coggins hadn't considered, because of course they must have. They know exactly what they're doing with this sort of circuit. But that headroom in the Thorpy, it just ruined my experience of that pedal. And I really wanted to keep it, but I ended up having to sell it on because I just couldn't live with how crunchy all of those pedals are. And as I said in that video, I did set my pedal to the same settings that lots of other demo people had theirs set to at a certain point in their video, just to check that the distortion kind of matched up between mine and theirs, and mine hadn't been messed with and it was misbehaving. In every instance, it was exactly the same. So my pedal was set absolutely perfectly in terms of how it should have been set. It's just that circuit, it distorts. And yeah, you know, a lot of people love that pedal. As I said, if you're running it with the treble down and the blend down, you might not ever make it distort if you're just using it very subtly, but go to the extremes and it kind of becomes a gain stage, and it was a real problem for me. But anyway, who have we got here then? Lisp. Okay, just about got through that. Oh no, I have been playing a left-handed guitar with a dead tone pot for years. I changed the wiring as you mentioned and suddenly sounds alive. Thank you so much. It really surprises me that really big name guitar manufacturers like Fender still do this, in that they use logarithmic volume and tone pots that typically go in right-handed guitars and are designed for right-handed guitars in terms of their direction of travel. And then they want to keep that direction of travel relative to the guitar the same for a left-handed guitar, so they just wire the pot in reverse. And it kind of fixes the problem, but what they don't ever seem to consider is it reverses the taper. So with a tone pot, you get nothing, 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 boom, and you get like a blanket over your sound from like 1 to 1.5, and everything else is completely useless because the taper's the wrong way round and they haven't used a left-handed pot. You can't help but think, for the price a lot of these guitars go for, an extra couple of pounds or dollars to invest in some left-handed pots would make sense, but they don't. They just wire it in reverse and hope we don't notice, which is a real pain in the backside. But anyway, I'm glad that my solution of having it working backwards relative to the body of the guitar in terms of which way you turn it to get to 10 and 0 worked, because yeah, it corrects the taper. It just works backwards to what you're used to, but it actually behaves like the pot is designed to behave. So anyway, I have all my pots wired backwards, so I just get used to turning the volume the wrong way to get to 10 and 0. Once you're used to it, it becomes second nature. You don't even think about it, and you can use any pot on the market. Chief line. Can't help but smile every time Perky gives you the eyes when he loves what he's just got out of a pedal. So honest. I do know what you mean. I always cringe when I see that in the videos when I watch them back, and I kind of play something and go like that. I always thought it was really creepy, but I'm glad someone's getting something out of it anyway. But yeah, I just like to plug into a pedal, and every time I find something that surprises me or it sounds especially good, I can't really sort of disguise the fact that it's sort of doing something for me. But there we go. Anyway, the last question this month from Duncan Porter. I always try and end on an angry one or a funny one. Very basic with no useful details, such as how to use set screw knobs on knurled shafts, differences between USA and metric sized pots, knurls, bushing lengths, etc., how audio A and linear B tapers differ in their audible response, conventional versus sealed precision pots, and how the only thing that affects tone is the actual measured resistance value. Brand, size, colour, taste, smell makes no difference at all electrically. Now, I love this comment because this was on a video which was the Pots 101 video, in which the title includes the phrase 8 important basics, and poor old Duncan found the video very basic. So I don't even need to kind of come up with a response to that. It kind of responds to itself. But anyway, good to have you here, Duncan. Thank you for your feedback. But I think you might have clicked on the wrong sort of video for the information you were looking for. Ambry. Anyway, that's the end of the questions for this month, folks. Thank you ever so much for all your comments and questions throughout the month. I love making these Q&As. I try and respond to you all in the comment section too, but the ones that I think will be most relevant to the most people, I try and include in these Q&As just to kind of give you a slightly expanded version of what I type in the comments. But keep them coming, folks. I love hearing from you guys. So I haven't actually shot any videos for July yet. I'm hoping there will be something new unveiled on the channel, hopefully earlier on in the month. I'm waiting for one thing to arrive that I've been on the waiting list for quite some time. If that turns up in time, there will be something new that you will then see on the channel going forward quite a lot coming. But I'm 99% sure it'll be sometime in the month. I'm hoping early on, if the wait time I was quoted is kind of correct. But that's really exciting. It's something I've never really sort of done too much with before in terms, well, I've never done anything with before in terms of a style of instrument. I've given something away there. But yeah, I've really been enjoying my initial getting to know it. And it's a bit of a sort of left turn considering the sort of guitars I usually play. But there we go. So that's something else coming. But yeah, there'll be a few other things. I need to kind of work out exactly what videos I'm shooting this month because I've got things lined up to demo. I've got lots of concepts I want to look into, but I just need to kind of find the time because life just seems to be running away with me at the moment. Everything is so busy. But anyway, folks, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope this video was interesting and useful for you. I love doing these Q&As, as I said. Please do carry on subscribing. I know I always say it, but it makes a huge difference when you do that. And I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.